their question just, straight to the point and not keep going around. So now to introduce our speaker. Our speaker for today is Ruth Mompati, who is a doctoral candidate at the University of Witwatersrand. He holds both an master's degree and a BA honors in sociology from the same university. Mr. Mompati is a widely published author, and his books include Biko Leaves, Contesting the Legacies of Steve Biko, which was published by Palgrave Moore in 2008, Fools of Millville, published by Sankara Publishers in 2013, and From a Place of Friend Talk. He is an activist who was a member of social movements such as the Lagos People's Movement and the September National Indizo. He currently serves as the president of the Black First Land First movement. Mr. Mompati is a Black consciousness intellectual whose interests include the land and the race question in South Africa. If you may all please give a round of applause for Mr. Mompati.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, I want to thank Dr. Nyoka for the invitation. I do consider this university a sacred place for reasons of being the place where Steve Biko walked out of the white organization called MUSAS to form the Black Consciousness Movement and the student movement called SASO at the time. So it is a very important space for the launching of a project for Black liberation. My talk today is titled 2024 Election, a right-wing or left-wing consolidation. So I'm going to read my notes because I don't want to be all over the place. And at the end, we can have an interaction as the chair has suggested. The survey by the Social Research Foundation indicates that in the case of a 66% turnout in the elections, the MK party will pick up 24% of the votes in KwaZulu-Natal, while the ANC is projected to get 25%, the DA 15%, the IFP another 24%, and the EFF 5%. The rest shall be shared amongst other parties. The poll confirms the outcome of a ward by-election in KwaZulu-Natal, Ward 8 in Vryheid, Abaqulusi, Zululand. There the IFP got 47%, the ANC 31%, MK Party 19%, and the EFF 1%, down from 5%. We must note that it was the first attempt at elections by the MK Party. The same trend is observed in the latest Pongolo by-election results. The IFP got 1,975, MK 1,237, the ANC 848, EFF 51%. A claim can be made that MK is going to eat the ANC and EFF vote, in particular in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng. What does this election result suggest for the 2024 national and provincial election? One thing is that whatever the outcomes of the elections, the MK party shall be a serious feature of our politics. But what is our politics? We must ask if the entry of MK in South African politics shall have an impact in re-articulating the political scene and change the trajectory of our national politics. In this intervention, I shall argue for a possible left turn in the medium and long term. So let's see. So let's just go a little bit in terms of history. Since 1994, the South African politics under the ANC can be described as right-wing and anti-black, also described as neoliberal. The shift from the RDP to GEAR under Mbeki. I'm sure people are aware of that massive shift when Mbeki took over from Mandela. The macroeconomic direction was informed by the RDP policy, and Mbeki brought in the GEAR policy. 30 years of the ANC rule has eloquently made the case for South Africa political economy as right-wing, anti-black and neoliberal reality managed by the ANC. The shocking statistics of 3% of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange being black-owned is a graphic representation of this reality. The fact that white households earn 6 times more than the black household is another indicator of the continued racial inequalities. Unemployment for blacks is over 40%, while white unemployment is at around 5%. Perhaps the starkest display of continuity of apartheid is the land redistribution stats. Whites, who are about 10% of the population, own over 70% of the land. This picture persisted years of the ANC rule notwithstanding. The South African transition to born-again apartheid in 1994 was once again shown by the brutal display of state power in the Marikana massacre. Blacks were murdered for demanding a living wage by the ANC government. The same government had murdered Andries Tatani for demanding water earlier. The core character of the post-1994 state can be described as anti-black. Left-leaning scholars such as Frederick Bond, his book Early Transition, Hein Marais, Limits to Change, Saint-Peter Blanche, Lost in Translation, have variously sought to explain the ANC shift to the right once it got into power. However, the Pan-Africanists led by Sobukwe had already defined the ANC as accommodationist civil rights as opposed to liberation movement. The same criticism was leveled by the New Unity movement of I.B. Tabata. In his 1948 majestic letter to Nelson Mandela, Tabata described the ANC as basically collaborationist as opposed to the ANC Youth League, which is progressive. Tabata challenged Mandela to reconcile the reactionary ANC to the progressive Youth League. You must really go and Google I.B. Tabata and read this letter to Mandela. It's a very incisive criticism of the liberalism of the ANC from the New Unity movement. And Tabata was asking the question of how Nelson Mandela and these other radical youths in the ANC Youth League reconcile their position of radical progressive politics whilst being members of the ANC. Now, this double identity of the ANC perhaps harps back to the initial confrontation with whites defined by the Amaqaba ethic. The Amaqaba rejected the incorporation into Western modernity. Amaqaba accepted Western modernity primarily through the Christian belief system and European education. The creation of Amaqaba was not voluntary. It was mostly survival mechanism. We all know the tragic character of Okonkwo in Chinua Achebe's majestic Things Fall Apart. If you read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, you will meet the character of Okonkwo, this man who violently refuses to accept the white rule. But his resistance is so tragic that looking at the importance of black people, of Africans, to confront the white system, we know that Okonkwo take his own life. So the Amaqaba and Amaqoboka idioms explain the nature of resistance and incorporation into the white system. Amaqaba refused to enter Western modernity and generally were decimated. And I'm arguing that in the ANC itself, you have these two ethics competing together. The political temperament of Amaqoboka was one of accommodation of white power. These are the people who started the ANC 6 years after Bata's war, inspired by the Kaba ethic. It is very, I think, instructive that the ANC is formed in 1912. 6 years later, 1906, Bambata had put up that battle against the colonizers, and it was a battle of actual armed conflict. But when the ANC was formed in 1912, the first thing that we did was to send a delegation to London to go plead the case of black people, instead of joining the Bambata project of armed conflict against the colonizer. So in the DNA of the ANC, therefore, the Qoboka ethic is predominant. So the political temperament of Amaqoboka was one of accommodation of white power. These are the people who started the ANC 6 years after Bambata's war, inspired by the Kaba ethic. The ANC, faced with the reality of the 1913 Land Act, chose the path of struggling through deputations. This was the first temperament of negotiating oneself out of power. There have been other times when black nationalism raised its head in the ANC to try to resuscitate the Kaba ethic. The 1959 breakaway by Sobukwe is in protest to the Freedom Charter, which was adopted by the ANC in 1955. The charter was written by white liberals, gave away the birthright of blacks to land by declaring that in 1955, South Africa belonged to all who live in it, both black and white. So Sobukwe and the Pan-Africans could not accept this surrender of black land rights to the colonizer. How can South Africa belong to black and white when whites have usurped the right to land and Africans were landless? So Sobukwe and his group left the ANC because of the Freedom Charter, which it is a known fact was written by white liberals and given over to the ANC. Just like the Constitution of 1994 was written by white liberals. Post the PAC, the hegemony of liberals inside the ANC was contested by a gang of 8 led by the Makiwane brothers. They got expelled, and Joslovo sent MK to murder them in the Transkei. Then ran away. They had ran away from exile and sought refuge in the Transkei, Bantustan under Matanzi. It is, I think, students of politics who want to understand the contestation within the ANC must look at this Makiwane situation, because the Makiwane brothers were in leadership of the ANC. So one of them was very close to O.R. Tambo. When the liberals were taking over the ANC, the Makiwane brothers resisted this takeover, and in 1975 they were expelled from the ANC. They continued to resist. They were forced back to South Africa from exile, and they went to seek refuge in the Transkei, where Joslovo sent Umkhonto weSizwe to go and murder them in the Transkei. So I think it's an important area of resistance, and the defeat of black nationalism inside of the ANC, which is not being spoken. Of course, when you read the Communist Party's depiction of the Makiwane brothers, they're depicted as reactionary, as backward, and all that goes with that. But they were resisting the influence of white liberals in the ANC. So the Gqoboka ethic explained the major compromises made by the ANC during negotiations. These compromises found their way into the Constitution of South Africa. 3 moves during the negotiations with the apartheid regime anticipated the right-wing shift. First was acceding to the right-wing demands of self-determination. It is not widely known fact that racial enclaves such as Orania are constitutionally sanctioned. Article 235 of the Constitution states, and I quote, "The right of South African people as a whole to self-determination as manifested in this Constitution does not preclude, within the framework of this right, recognition of the notion of the right to self-determination of any community sharing a common cultural and language heritage within a territorial entity in the Republic or any other way determined by national legislation." So Orania is protected under the South African Constitution. The white people of the Western Cape wants to declare Western Cape a white enclave, and they are protected in terms of this Constitution. And this particular clause was negotiated a few days before the 1994 election, and it was a signed agreement between Thabo Mbeki and Constant Viljoen, who represented the right-wingers of the time. So the right-wingers were able to negotiate themselves into the Constitution to be able to start a Boerestad if they so wish. That is the first big compromise. The second, the constitutionalization of injustice. As Prof. Mahoba described, the spirit and letter of the South African Constitution was the section 25 of the Constitution, which guarantees property rights to whites, basically providing constitutional legitimation to colonial land dispossession. If blacks want land, they must buy it from willing sellers. It is there in the Constitution, it is entrenched. The third move, which is not normally spoken about, was the change of South Africa from a parliamentary supremacy system to a constitutional supremacy system. Whites had exercised power given by the voters. Parliament had the last word. Parliament was above the courts. That's why Sobukwe was kept in jail by dint of parliamentary power. You know Sobukwe? Every year, white people sit in parliament and they say, no, it cannot be released. It cannot be released. They have the thing called Sobukwe Cross. But the point I'm making here is the distinction between parliamentary supremacy and constitutional supremacy. Under the white regime, it was parliamentary supremacy. So parliament had the final say on how to govern. Right now, power is surrendered to the 11 people sitting in Braamfontein. It boggles the mind why the ANC agreed to politically castrate itself in this manner. These 3 moves, the protection of stolen land, Boerestad, and giving supremacy power to unelected 11 judges of the Constitutional Court, explains why apartheid never died. The picture of continued racial inequality can be linked back to the Constitution. The ANC is in office but not in power. The courts run the country. The racist DA is the vanguard of born-again racism. The right-wing shift was operationalized in the state policy through, as we say, the move from the reconstruction development to the gear policy. Paulo Jordan described it as a fascist policy framework. And Mbeki responded to Jordan at the time and said, call me a fascist. Now, we all know what the fascist macroeconomic policy means. The right-wing hegemony was challenged from within the ANC by Jacob Zuma in the last stanza of his presidency, together with the Guptas, my friends. They staged a siege of Stellenbosch. Zuma called from platform of parliament for black political parties to unite to return land. Here again we saw the emergence of the Kaba ethic operationalized in the radical economic transformation agenda. Thabo Mbeki was moved to write a 30-page missive denouncing Zuma as being an ANC for calling for black unity to realize land expropriation without compensation. We see here again inside the ANC the Kaba versus Gqoboka ethic. People must really go Google that 30-page document of Mbeki, where he responds to Zuma's call for land expropriation without compensation, calling for black political parties to unite. Mbeki writes this 30-page document to say Zuma is wrong in being anti-ANC for calling for blacks to unite. The ANC does not talk about black unity, it talks about non-racialism. Well, as Zuma was moving in this way, white monopoly capital responded, immobilized 1 billion rand to buy the 2017 ANC conference against the Kaba mobilization of Zuma. The Ramaphosa administration had served the right-wing agenda well. This agenda is under threat once more with the emergence of the MK party. White capital seeks a right-wing consolidation through sponsoring multiple emergence of black parties. A blatant example is the 15 million given to Arise Mzansi by the Oppenheimers. Can you believe it? 15 million rand given to a party which is not known by anyone. But this is part of this fragmentation of the black bloc. The DA has come out to say it is willing to collaborate with the ANC of Ramaphosa. So if the ANC falls below 50%, the DA is willing to co-rule with the ANC in what could be a right-wing consolidation. There is nothing ideological stopping the ANC to collaborate with the DA. The ANC of Ramaphosa represents the Gqoboka ethic of white admiration. The emergence of MK presents the possibility for left-wing consolidation. For a left-wing government to be realized, MK must garner over 40% of the vote. This seems like a tall order, but it's not possible. As we know, politics is the art of the possible. Should the ANC move with the DA, then certainly a left-wing government shall emerge only in 2028. So in these elections of 2024, the ANC fall below 50% and it forms a government with the DA, I argue that it shall have negotiated itself out of total power. In the subsequent elections, we will see a left-wing government. It will be the end of the ANC if the ANC moves in this way, where it co-governs with the DA, which is a real possibility. Well, the future is wide open. Only the organized and ideologically clear can claim that future. The right wing is loaded money-wise and is well organized. It has the advantage, but the future is left wing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mantala, for the wonderful presentation. We will now be moving towards the question and answer session. But I think I don't know if we know what we can get from the presentation is the shortcomings of the ANC, or rather maybe just the formation of the South African state under the ANC. If you look at, when you were talking about the issues of the constitution, last year we had Ndumiso Dada in the department and speaking on the abolition of the constitution of South Africa because it doesn't serve the needs of the majority of the South African country, which is the black people. And I don't know, then again, the constitution is like throughout the world, people praise it for being like the best constitution in the world because of the things that it accommodates. And then when you hear all these issues that come with the constitution and the calls for its abolition, you get to wonder then if we do that, what do we go for? And also as a state, where now will you be centered in global politics? But besides that, it's just a comment. I don't know, maybe I'm understanding you wrong, I'm just hearing my own things. When you speak of the MK, I will admit that I don't know much about it. I haven't made the time to actually like find out what they do actually is about their own controversy in the party. But what I've come to notice with like these newly formed political parties, no shade to anyone if you like look at your action essay, they usually break away from the prominent ones like your DAs because of whatever issues they face. So when I'm not saying that you are advocating for them, but when you speak, the way that you sound when you speak about the MK right now, and you're saying that, the left wing and the left wing is the future. But considering the people that are in the front of the MK party, they come from the very problematic ANC that people highlight, and you also highlight in your presentation, correct me if I'm wrong. So are these the people that we should really trust? I mean, they put Zuma at the front of that, and it's not make sure that that we should really follow. I'm not saying that I will admit that I don't know what their ideological road is, if you can put it that way. So I don't know, I'm trying to understand the future, yes, left wing being the future and MK being the future, and I can understand they did get the numbers, I am seeing it. But do you think, in your own opinion, that maybe these are the people that we should be listening to, considering where they come from? Because I feel like it's just going to be a repetition of what was happening in the ANC. And whenever politicians go outside to do their own thing, it's always trying to prove a point that I am doing better than you, and nothing necessarily about the people of the South African country that need to be represented by these matters. But I hope that makes sense, and if you can, please do answer it. But I will open the floor for 3 rounds. Not 3 rounds of hands, 3 hands. This is going to be the first round of questions. I'll be taking 3 hands, so there's Martino in front of me. There's one at the back, and I need 1 more hand. Okay, I think we can go with the 2 for now, and then I'll be with that. Sure. So I don't know if, you can start in that order, we can finish with my question. That's it, my question. So Martin.
Okay, thank you, and thank you so much again for a good presentation. Let's talk about the emergence of MK. I have to admit from the get-go that Zuma is a political genius, and you can't go to university for that. It is great, and I think with the emergence of MK, it's a great sabotage to the ANC. They don't want to officially expel him in the party because they are scared of the damage that it will do. Hence, the likes of Gweta Mantashe always say, you walked away, which is nonsense. But I want to tell you that I have a problem with your friends, the Guptas and Zuma. When we look at the emergence of MK and the contributions of President Zuma, we should not look at it in isolation of the 9 years of state power that Zuma had. I don't think the MK is an option, and I would like to reject the idea that it's for black people, and MK is just a tribal party like the IFP. Even when he chose places to go and campaign in Limpopo, he went to places where he gave them tar roads, not the entire Limpopo, but he go to some village in Miyeshe and many others. That shows that this man is not there to serve the people, but also to use MK to defend himself against the brutal regime of Ramaphosa, because Ramaphosa seems like a man who's been given the money using the courts to torture Zuma. So I would like to reject your thinking that MK is an option. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. You say the future is livable. I will get to that statement. But it's really mind-boggling that the ANC is not interested in dismantling the agreement that they had with the whites in the Western Cape. Is it really mind-boggling? Is the ANC, as you said, I think the ANC came to the end, has ended multiple times. It's not once. And I think there are different versions of these endings. But it's hard for us to pick them up because we're constantly being distracted by other things that are happening. And the biggest distraction being things like housing, load shedding, many distractions that are happening here. So we've missed all these endings of the ANC. And I wonder if I want us to think, at least I would like you to think of the many versions of liberalism that can be possible rather than the singular version that's dedication of anti-blackness. There has to be more than that. So I want you to think about this notion of liberalism. What version of liberalism are you talking about? That's my question.
Okay, the Zuma project is not made sure. Firstly, I don't think any one of us must trust a politician. Yes, myself included. No, because we are not running a religious project. It cannot be on the basis of faith. It has to be on the basis of a program which is articulated and actions that follows through. I mean, like earlier on during the engagement with the postgrad students, we spoke about my friend Julius Malema, who speaks left but acts right. When you give political power to the DA, where is the left-wing agenda there? You are not pushing a left-wing agenda. You just claim to be a lefty. Now, Zuma's first 5 years in power, he was completely following the agenda of neoliberalism, of Thabo Mbeki. There was no rupture. But I'm arguing that in the last stanza, there was rupture, articulated rupture, with the Right Wing project. You can't argue against the mining charter, which says 30% of the rights must be given to black people in a year's time. Not only that, over 50% of representation in the boards of the mines must be black people. 30% must be broken into 15%, the communities that live there, and 15% must go to workers. That is a progressive agenda. Zuma's call from Parliament as a sitting president for land expropriation without compensation, it's a progressive move. You can't argue against that. His giving of free education, which has been reversed by the administration of Ramaphosa, including the big one, he ended load shedding by law. We forget this. We forget this. Zuma finished load shedding with the appointment of Brian Molefe and Machela Koko. There was no land shedding in South Africa anymore. And then came our man, giving 1 billion rand. And he is messing state institutions so that he can sell them to his friends. It's a clear program. That's why they sold SAA and they will sell ESCOM, because all of us now are so harassed by ESCOM that even, guys, here is shocking. Since 5 a.m., Utubzaman load shedding until 11. Aibo, guys, so many hours. But so if somebody comes and says, I will end load shedding, let's privatize this thing, we will also be tired and say, no, privatize this thing. So Zuma has made serious moves. I mean, one of the things that is not spoken about is his HIV and AIDS policy, which raised life expectancy in South Africa under Thabo Mbeki's reluctance to provide ARVs. And then he also made these two moves, the BRICS move, he consolidated it. And do you know that Thabo Mbeki, you know this man Thabo Mbeki, he sided with corporations which were supporting apartheid to kill our people. He said we can't go to court in the US to claim reparations for our people. He stood with those corporations which were involved in the apartheid mass murdering of our people. That is Thabo Mbeki. And we don't have time, but you know, I'm arguing that the compromises, some of the compromises that Mandela made were necessary. Because remember, comrades, Mandela's compromises were time-bound. The sunset clause was for 5 years. So between 1994 to 1999, the ANC had to co-rule with the National Party. That is why if you see there was declared deputy president, and you see some ministers were white from the National Party because of the sunset clause. But the sunset clause was time bound. Now here is the biggest betrayal. Thabo Mbeki gets 2/3 majority. He doesn't need another political party to amend the constitution. Thabo Mbeki could have amended the constitution to realize land expropriation without compensation and more, but he doesn't. It is left to Zuma towards the end of his second term to revert back to the possibility of a 2/3 majority. Now the ANC did not have this, but it calls upon all black political parties to create that 2/3 majority to correct this issue. So Thabo Mbeki is the man. If you want to see the biggest sellout, it's actually Thabo Mbeki. So, Comrade Shivambu says that my leader is a tribalist. But leader, that man goes to the Monamole in Limpopo. The people that support MK, the people of the Transkei, the Xhosa-speaking people, my people support MK. I've not seen enough in the Free State and the Northwest, but we know that in, of course, you will argue that Gauteng is quite Zulu-speaking, but the Zulus of Gauteng are different from the Zulus of KwaZulu-Natal. And there is nothing in MK that suggests to me that it's a tribal party. Well, I'm there myself, a Tswana, Xhosa-speaking person. Well, there was the last question about what version of liberation or liberalism. Well, all liberalism is bad. At least in the context of colonialism and racism. You know, the liberals articulated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 in the UN. Almost all those countries were colonialists. They were colonizing us here, they were sitting there, making the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. By the way, even the apartheid government was there in the League of Nations. Jan Smuts was a key figure, was part of the drafters of this Human Rights Charter. White liberals do not have black people in their imagination when they articulate the regime of rights. Take South Africa. The Liberal Party is the DA. That's a liberalism of whiteness, of white supremacy. Given the version of black liberals, it will be many versions of the DA with black faces. And they will all reject the notion of land redistribution. They all go for individual rights and protection of property. How do you protect property which is stolen? So you say that by law, moving forward, we must accept that stolen property is legitimate. So liberalism has not served the interests of black people. Of course, we can even argue communists, white communists are liberals. Because if you look at the Freedom Charter, it's an document influenced by white liberals who are communists. So white liberals, communists are there to serve white civilization. Make sure that we don't go too far as black people. They are here to monitor our moves, and they've done very well thus far.
So I'm going to open the floor for another round of questions, but Ankondi, I entirely agree with you on, I agree, like, no religious thinking and group thinking, and I mean, you did make a point prior that, basically apartheid never ended it. You maybe think of the Susan Bofuwash book that apartheid never ended it, just got privatized. Of course, it's speaking of a different context. But you made a point about, it is important to look at the leaders based on what they're doing, not just faith on what they can do, but also considering the history of the country. I think that forms part and parcel of who South Africans are. Because where we're coming from, South Africans, all they had was faith that things will get done by the people that were their leaders at the time. So I'm not sure if you think we can maybe exclude that, but yes, we need to see their actions, but I don't think we can entirely dismiss the part of having faith in leaders, if I'm making sense. But anyways, yeah, let me just let other people talk. So I'm going to need Kenz's Lesiko here, the head of the back, and Tuma here. So in that order.
So you speak so much about how we should focus on the leaders' actions, like what they do and not what they say. But if we are to be honest and look for the second part of Zuma's administration, I believe for certain that we have the problems that we have now as a country because of part of what he did during his administration. So then are we to ignore the large part of what he did during his administration now because he's the face of this new party, new controversies, and try to look forward, to the possibility that maybe he will do better under that party, and ignore. Because I don't think, Ramaphosa has only been in power for, a few years, so I don't think he can do that much,
It's 6 years now.
Yeah, 6 years is a few years in comparison to,
9 years.
But do you get the point? I don't think, one can rule the country. You talk about the mining charter, you talk about land redistribution and expropriation, you talk about, fees, but we still have these problems, and these problems were happening even during his administration. So we should ignore that now that he's part of this new party and be like, okay. Because he had the ideas, but where's the execution? Or what was the execution during his administration? And then we look forward to controversy. So is he going to articulate these ideas how he did in the ANC, or are they going to be a bit different?
Okay, second hand from the back.
After Andy.
Sure.
A comment and a question. The first comment is that looking at the historical events with Zuma's presidency and from start to finish, my view is that when Zuma seemed more aligned to black progressives and the black agenda, it was possibly to save his own skin because he had ample time during his tenure to call for expropriation, to call for free education in the way that he did towards the end of his tenure. So I argue that during his tenure he could have done so, but he didn't do so, and when his chips were not aligning, he sought a new agenda, basically to save his own skin. My question, that is my view. The question that I have, as an avid reader, what do you make of the white books? For example, License to Loot, The President's Keepers, and other books like the Akapon Umalanga, and so forth, Tobacco Wars, Blessed by Posasa. What do you make of those narratives? Do you simply view them as white narratives painting a black picture, or do you agree and subscribe to some of their views as works of investigative journalism? Do you find any credibility in those books as a reader and as a publisher? That is my question. Thank you.
No, I think I must just thank you for the presentation, and also thank you for some of the points you made. I'm just a bit confused, but I think I must also thank you for being honest. We must not trust you. I think yes, I think that was a good point there. But I think my question centers around liberalism as well, like Umbari has said, right? Yes. So I think, do you not think maybe your theorization of the South African politics suffers from this universalistic understanding of Africans, this homogenizing idea of African politics, that by virtue of having the same pigmentation should have the same political interests? So I'm just confused more about you mentioned that Amaproboga were sort of these people, even dating back to the Latesh and and others. But there were people who had this, what do you call it? I wanted to use the words you used. I think you said something about them having white admiration, something like that, which is what is also in your argument is manifesting now within the ANC of Ramaphosa. But I'm thinking to myself, do you not firstly, are you not homogenizing Amaproboga? Because there are also those that are being among who really came to white liberalism or liberalism as by virtue of conquest. They have been rescued from Uyinza apparently as having been slaves of Uyinza. But who were the ones who pushed Christianity and liberalism amongst the Makosa, not because they were being conquered by some British somewhere. Yes, they may have had contact and relations with the British, but surely they were not under conquest at the time when Tsigane, for example, took away his robes, and all those things. I mean, that surely can't be an accurate account of that history. We know that there were black people whose agency dictated that they leave some of the things that are practiced on Marcos and adopt this new culture, which seemed attractive and even dominant, if you want to say. But surely it can't be the case that the theorization we're going to follow is going to suggest that all Xhosa people or all Africans had this same homogeneous interest maybe or ideology that when they break away from it, no, they're all of a sudden sellouts, they're all of a sudden white admirers. I mean, surely that's not a very accurate analysis based on our history. I don't know if we have one goes on your opinion.
Because of time we can't, but I'm sure after he'll be available. So over to you, Dr. Mompati.
Yeah, the Sifo says that we can't ignore what he did. What did he do? What did he do? I mean, the white press will say Nkandla and Guptas, right? Now, we know that the court said Zuma can only pay 8 million. The rest of that money is legitimate. That's what the court said. But of course, the media talks about the bigger expenditure. The Guptas. What did the Guptas do? Obrima Chika argues that the Guptas disrupted state capture. State capture was already there by white capital. The Guptas were disruptors of that process. As I described earlier, because they wanted into the economy and they could not get into the economy without associating themselves with black political power. So I do want us to talk about the sins of Zuma. What are these sins that Zuma committed? Basically, the Guptas did not occupy 5% of total South African economy. They didn't. Look at Eskom alone. White capital controls 90% of Eskom. Is that not the real capture? Shouldn't we talk about the capture of the state by white monopoly capital, which is the real enemy, which is invisible because it has normalized itself so much? The key, I'm arguing, the key task of revolutionaries today is to make visible the invisible hand of white monopoly capital, because it has normalized itself and it is not seen as a problem. So, yes, my question is, what are the sins of Jacob Zuma? Actually. So the brother says that Jacob Zuma did it for his own scheme. As again, my attitude towards politics is the motives of politicians should not detain us. What they actually do is what is important. So if Zuma gave us land because he was saving his skin, good shot. Let's make sure that we push more on the part of the skin that he must run away from. Mugabe in Zimbabwe, Mugabe lost a referendum. ZANU-PF was losing power. And Mugabe, to make sure that ZANU-PF stayed in power, redistributed land. Now, are you going to reject the land program of Mugabe because he's doing it to stay in power. Or you say, thank you, let's get the land. So I'm saying that we should not worry about, because politicians lie all the time. We must look at what they are doing. Even if they are doing it for bad motives, if it's positive, we must accept it. So that is my attitude towards Zuma. He did very good things. What motives he was serving, that's irrelevant. The good things are what we should take into consideration.
Sorry, I can't stay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for attending, ma'am. You represented your nation very well.
I met you when you spoke for the EFF in a festival one year.
Okay.
And I asked you if white people could join the EFF, and you all just cracked up laughing.
Yeah, no, you can go join them now.
And your party?
No, you're not allowed. No. There is this sophisticated argument about homogenizing black people. So black people are supposed to be differentiated. We have different interests. We are all colonized. We are all enslaved. We are all victims of apartheid. What are these different interests that we have? Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm stepping these people who are pushing this. You are hell-bent in finding differences amongst black people. There are none.
They are there.
No, the differences can be about what interest we serve. Are you serving decolonization or are you serving colonialism? That is the big difference. There is no other. You don't want land, my friend.
No, I do, but not on your terms, not on these homogeneous terms. That's what I'm saying.
So what is your difference with black people? What is that you want other black people don't want?
Okay, maybe who's black? Maybe that's a better question to ask, because it doesn't seem like we have a similar...
You are black, I'm black. I mean, what is the question?
That by virtue of pigmentation.
Of course.
What?
Of course,
Okay.
blackness is primarily about pigmentation, even in Biko's definition.
Then we are not all black in that case.
Of course, we are not all black. Still, Biko is very clear that there are non-whites amongst blacks. And non-whites are people who support the white agenda. They are not black in terms of Steve Biko.
Sure.
Only those who support the black agenda are blacks. Even Malcolm X makes the distinction amongst the slaves. There's the house Negro and the field Negro. Field Negroes are not having the same interest as the house Negro. The field Negro, when the house of the master burns, he prays to his God that more big fire must come. The house Negro says, oh, our house is burning. So I agree from that point of view that there is a difference amongst black people. But that difference has got to do with where you stand with relation to black people's liberation and oppression. That's the biggest distinction. Slave catchers and enslaved. There is no other difference that we have.
That's not true.
So what are those differences?
Yeah, because there were 3 questions. But
Okay.
I think you spoke just now when you say even Biko himself says black consciousness is primarily about black. That's the scale. He himself, you can open yourself if you kill him. But it's not about pigmentation of the scale, but attitude of the mind. Hence, we have your set school party identifying as black, other colored people, and almost everyone in here except for white people. So now, if you're saying, going back to Kuma, that mass, you must not think take away skin color when looking at blackness. What exactly are you saying?
You don't read Biko, you read a phrase. Go read that same paragraph. Read on top. Because Biko says, we are oppressed on the basis of our skin color. Then, and then he described black people as those, of course, all the oppressed, colored, Indian, African, are black on the basis of our oppression. But there's a further criterion to be black. You must take a stand against oppression. Because definition has got 2 layers. You must be oppressed, but that's not enough. To be real black, you must take a stand against oppression. And then he defines non-whites who come from the oppressed, but who serve the white system. So those are the 2 distinctions of black people. Those who serve the system are non-whites. Black people, real black people, he says, are those who stand up against the system. So Biko is very clear about blackness. It is not inclusive. He says it himself, that the definition of black is not all inclusive. There are non-whites amongst us, and those are black people who serve the white system. Yeah, because pigmentation, he says that we must unite on the basis of our skin color, the thing that is being used to oppress us. There is no confusion. That's why Biko formed the black-only organizations. He excluded white people because they could not be black. They are white.
We have about 4 minutes. I'll allow 2 hands, and just straight to the point, no preamble, please. There's 1 hand from the back. And okay, let's take. Okay, Dr. Nyoka is saying let's take 1.
Okay. Yes, okay, thank you for the chance. And also thank you for the good presentation. I just heard you speaking about the Cape independence movement, and which is quite interesting. I would like you to elaborate more on that. Like, in your view, what is the fundamental objective or goal that the Cape independence movement want to achieve, basically, when looking at the current status of analysis and gap analysis about the 2024 election? Because some they say there is no ANC, and then some are saying different things. So, in your view, what is the objective of the Cape independence movement?
So the Cape independent movement is white people trying to create a white enclave away from the black majority control South Africa. They want to create an apartheid Boer state where they run things. That is the fundamental basis of the Cape independence movement. It is white people simply saying, look, we must run away from these black people, create our own state where we govern ourselves, and me and you will go to the Cape with passports or visas to enter the white enclave. White people always are territorial. That's why they have the Orania. Basically, is the Orianification of the Western Cape by white racists who are tired of being ruled by black people. That is the basis of that Cape thing. And that call is protected by the Constitution. As I say, there's a clause in the Constitution that says if by language and so on you want self-determination, you must be granted that. So they are standing on very good constitutional rights in terms of the South African Constitution.
Okay, so we have come to an end of the Friday lunch seminar for this week. Thank you for everyone who interacted, and most of all, thank you to our guest speaker. You may not agree on a lot of things, but you did bring different perspectives that leave room for more interrogation. And also, this is an institution of learning. You are not, it is not set in stone what you think. You can always change how you think, and hopefully, for some of us, we might. But thank you so much for coming and availing yourself to us, and I hope everyone had fun. We can go home and
Okay, you can switch it off. Switch it off, but it will comment. Okay, it's fine, I'll check them later. Oh, where? Oh, finished.